Hi folks, these are three of the most expensive knives I've ever had on my channel at any time, and I have them all here together, so I thought it might be useful or interesting to do a comparison. It's not really a shootout, and there certainly won't be a winner and a loser. There may be a best knife here, there may be a worst knife here, but we're talking about all three knives that are all excellent. So all we're really considering is how excellent are they? And I'm not sure whether any of them really comes out head and shoulders above the others as a must buy. And I can absolutely assure you before we start, there isn't one of them that's going to come out as a, bin it, don't touch it. They're all three excellent knives, and if I could have them all permanently in my collection, believe you me, I would have those three all permanently in my collection. They have a number of things in common. They're all titanium handled, frame lock, folding pocket knives. They're all also not legal everyday carry in the UK unless you've a good purpose for carrying them. And I will at one point go into a little bit about that, because, well, if you have a knife in the UK that is as capable as, say, this Shing slip joint, this is legal to carry absolutely anywhere you like, anytime. There are very, very few exceptions, like schools you can't take it into. You shouldn't really take it into a pub, but in the main, you can carry that just about anywhere. And the question you have to ask as an ordinary person going about their ordinary day in the street, what is it that you would need a lock, absolutely need a lock for, that this knife couldn't do? Now, if you work in a building site, or you build boats, or you're a hunter or whatever, you might have a reason for wanting a lock knife or a fixed blade knife that is unequivocal. But for most of us, normally every day, it's very difficult to justify it. Now, basically, we'll run through them. First of all, we have the Medford Slim Midi Marauder. Now, this is a nice knife that, well, you know my hands are a bit rubbish. Opening hands, nobody knows one-handed is always difficult. My son tells me this is the easiest of the three to open one-handed, just using your thumb. It doesn't flick open, perhaps one can flick it open, but it's a roll open rather than a flick open knife. Blade on this is S35VN, and it has a titanium handle. It's made by Medford Knife and Tool, and that S tells you that it's S35VN steel. The blade on this is 3.5 inches or 90 millimeters with a lovely deep hollow grind. Satin finish on here and a stone wash, I think it is, on the flats of the blades. You've got this deep fuller on both sides, and obviously the grind is the same on both sides. It's got a nice milled titanium pocket clip, certainly the smartest of the three in terms of that, and it has a lock bar. In terms of opening, I say it's opened with the fuller. It does have what appear to be thumb studs, but they're not really. They're really the stop pins that lock the blade open. There's no internal stop pin there. It's just the two stop pins locking into the handle. Overall, we're talking about a length of 7 7/8 inches, or 200 millimeters, and it weighs in at 119 grams or 4.21 ounces, which will probably surprise many people by being the lightest in the field here. The next knife, which I can almost open one-handed, wow, look at that, is the Reeve's Insingo. This is not kind of the original Sebenza. This is the Insingo. This is again S35VN. The blade on this one is 3 5/8 of an inch, or 93 millimeters long, so it's 3 millimeters longer than the Medford. I don't know if it looks, I think it looks a lot longer, but it isn't. Titanium slab handles. You've got the Reeve integral lock, or the original frame lock, a titanium clip, but it's a bent clip as opposed to a milled titanium clip. The Insingo has thumb studs on both sides, which is why I was able to open it. The Sebenza usually only has them on the show side. You have to specify them as an extra if you want them on both sides. They're blue anodized, comes with a little lanyard. In terms of the construction of it, you have a screw at either end and a floating stop pin. Now, floating, by which I mean it's screwed in at one side, the other side is simply an interference fit through the handle. So when you adjust the pivot, unlike a Sebenza, it has an adjustable pivot. You adjust the pivot here. The only fixed fulcrum is here, so the scale moves as close to parallel as you can do. If it was fixed here, the fulcrum would be here, and as you screw the pivot tighter or looser, you would actually be changing the angle of the handle to the blade by having a floating pin there as close to parallel as it can be. It's a very big, beefy pivot pin, but unlike the Sebenza, there's no bushing, so it's the same as this in that respect. I should say all three of them run on phosphor bronze washers. So the third one here is the Rockstead Higo, which again is a titanium handled frame lock knife. This one has an 89 millimeter blade, so it's 4 millimeters shorter than the Insingo and 1 millimeter shorter than the Medford. So although it looks like it's got a really long slim blade, the Medford is actually a millimeter longer. It does have a much bigger handle though. The handle of the Rockstead is a full 5 inches, whereas the Medford is only 4 5/16. It's just over 4 1/4, and the Reeve is 4 7/8. So they're similar in many ways, but they just have a different look to them. I think that's where the real differences come. Now let's look at them in comparison. First of all, the handle. Now in this case, all three are titanium. Earlier incarnations of the Rockstead had a duralinium handle, which basically is aluminium with a bit of copper added to it. It's a very hard material and works very well, but I think there was a demand from people for it to be made of titanium. There was a doubt whether aluminium was up to the job. The downside to it is that this now brings the weight up to a full 5 ounces, 142 grams, which actually makes it the heaviest of the three. We're talking about a gram heavier than the Insingo, but we are talking 20 grams, over 20 grams, 23 grams heavier than the Medford, or 0.8 of an ounce. Now, they all have the same handle material, but in some ways they're all very different. The Medford takes Greg Medford's sort of traditional hard chines and so forth to give it some degree of interest. Also, I noticed though that it also has a really lovely curve along the back, right the way from the handle right along the blade. So although they're ostensibly the same, this one has lots of quite hard angles, but you'd think it might be uncomfortable in the hand as a result, but it really isn't. It really fits nicely into the hand. The handle feels a little bit shorter, but you've got this nice choil at the front, and that gives you somewhere to put that forward finger, and it actually gives gives you a really nice grip on it, and I actually like this knife a lot in hand. The Inkosi feels like a hard working knife. Now, Sebenza means work, so Sebenza is supposed to be the work knife, but honestly, this is a real chunky, you feel like you get some serious work done with this knife. It does look plain and straightforward, and in some ways that's its beauty and its charm, but you know, one could argue that it is the plainest of the lot. Now, you can get Chris Reeves knives with micarta inlays and things. I don't know if they do them on the Inkosi. They certainly do them on the Sebenza. So if you want a fancy looking one, that's not a problem. But if you want a hard working knife, this has got a really good look for that. Now the Rockstead, which is the most expensive knife here by a mile, does have some beautiful milling on its handle, which has a way of looking like it moves. As you turn it in the light, it's like the ripples of sand. It's based on sand in a Japanese Zen garden, incidentally. That's the idea of the look. It looks really, really nice. Now, having the biggest handle also means that I've got quite big hands. There's a really nice grip on this knife, really, really good. And the thumb studs being both double and also quite wide actually give you a really good place to put your thumb. You can choke up here actually, because the way the blade finishes there, there isn't a hard point to catch your finger on. So because this knife is incredibly sharp, you wouldn't want to get too close to that edge, but you can choke up there. If you choke up there, you've got loads and loads of handle. Really is a good knife in hand. And on the other side, again, we have the lock bar, really nicely cut actually. There's some beautiful, beautiful engineering in this. And that's what I want to come to next actually, is lock bars. All three of them are frame locks. All three of them are different. Now this one, we have titanium handles. So you've got titanium onto ZDP 189 steel. I never mentioned that, ZDP1. Sorry, it's YXR7 steel, which is 65 Rockwell. If you add titanium onto that, I think you'd have wear issues fairly quickly. So there's a stainless steel insert, which also works as an over travel stop. It just extends back into the handle, and you've got the detent ball, which I think you can just about see in there. It's removable, replaceable insert on the lock. The Inkosi lock is interesting for a number of reasons. One, it's the original frame lock, because Chris Reeves invented it, the integral lock. It has a very long amount of travel. The relief is right back here, right back at the end of the handle, which means that the amount of actual bend that this material has to have to give it travel at this end is actually less. You know, the longer you make the lever, the less bend less bend angle, has to occur back here to give you amount of travel here. But the most interesting thing about this is because it's the same as the new Sebenza 31, in that you have a ceramic detent bowl, which also acts as the lock onto the end of the blade. So there's no metal plate to replace. There's none of the old carburized titanium on steel. You've got a ceramic bowl on steel. Ceramic bowl Rockwell is something like 90 or something insane like that. So you're never going to have any wear. The only wear is on the tang of the at the end of the blade there, where the ball rubs, you can see that dark area just by my thumb there. That's where the ceramic ball rubs, and it does rub a little groove into the blade. Now there's some suggestions with the 31 that creates some lock stick. If it does on the 31s, it's maybe it's intermittent, maybe it's on all of them, but it certainly isn't on this Insingo, which is just... Well, it's another thing. When you open the lock, because you've got the ceramic ball is both the detent and the lock. If you just have a little listen here, clunk. There's a good solid clunk as it opens. With a more traditional separate detent ball and metal insert like this, you get... Yeah, do you hear that? I tried to make the two distinct clicks. One is the detent ball falling off the edge of the blade, and then the other is the lock engaging. Now, you probably don't notice the difference in real life, but that is the difference between a single detent ball and a metal insert and detent ball. The Medford, again, has a frame lock. You can see there. What's slightly different about it is that, well, let me just close it. When the knife's closed, you see these pins here. Instead of having a stop pin, that looks like it's going to be the stop pin at the back there, but it isn't. When this knife opens, now you can open it with these instead of as like thumb studs, but that's not really what they are. As you open it up, you'll see, I don't know which side, oh, it's on this side, it was on the right side. As you open it up, you'll see the detent ball locking hole and the detent ball track come out from the end of the handle, and you can actually see them open. Now, in a way, that's not a bad thing, because one of the things with Greg Medford, and we'll come to this in a minute, is that he doesn't like you taking his knives to bits for cleaning, and he likes them to run dry. So it's quite useful to be able to see that those bits and pieces are exposed, and you can get to them and clean them. You can reach the detent ball in there and give that a clean as well. Now, in terms of the kind of the looks of the handles, you know, if this were a competition, the Rockstead wins hands down, just because it's the one where somebody has spent the most time and energy making it look pretty. So it is that. The Insingo looks the most workmanlike. One thing I do like, though, is this kind of Norman arch shape to the top of the handle. You can see, I think it looks like a Norman arch. It actually has something similar at the other end. So it's not a lazy plain look, it's a well thought out, well engineered plain look. It's engineered to be the way that it is. There's design and thought that has gone into that. It's not just a lack of thought or design. It's, you know, it's not just flat straight lines either. There is, funnily enough, this is called the Rockstead Higo. This handle shape, if this was a Japanese sword, would be called the Higo style. A Higo sword handle in Japanese parlance is wider at the ends and has a sort of narrow waist in the middle. Really, really nice, actually. I like that. It's got a really nice feel in the hand to it. The Medford, I think, also looks really, really good. It's got a much more of a, I suppose, an industrial or workmanlike aesthetic, but you know, it really does look good. That deep grind looks fantastic. So now, in terms of the locks, This is very straightforward and simple. The best of the three is definitely the Inkosi. It's much the easiest to operate, and I can't really do with the one hand thing, but look, it's relatively easy to. It's really easy rather to release. Got a lovely sound to it at that end, and when you open it, again, just listen to this. Lovely. It's, it's done. It means business. I have to say that the worst of the locks has to go to the Medford. It's nice enough on the opening, but when it comes to shutting it, there's very little in way of a relief cutout here. So you've got to press your hand into this part of the well here, and then that edge that you're trying to press on is both quite hard and quite thin. So I can do it in there, but it's not pleasant, I have to say. Oops, it's not pleasant. But in terms of opening, actually the close on the detent isn't particularly satisfying. I mean, it works, but there's no great sound. On the opening side, then, you can just spidey drop. I was slightly worried I was going to smack it into Al's Inkosi there, but I didn't. So if it were a competition and we were looking for a winner and a loser, the Inkosi would be the winner. The Rockstead would be second, not far behind, and the Medford would be, unfortunately, in this particular feature, would be the loser. Now, in terms of clips, the Medford has the best looking clip of the lot. Really nice milled titanium clip. Enough room in there to clip over the hem of your trouser pocket. But not the most efficient or effective clip. It's there's not a huge amount of movement in that clip. It doesn't really clamp tightly, and it's not the most straightforward to get over your the edge of your trousers. There's but it works, but it's not the best clip here by a long shot. The Inkosi is a very nice clip. It's like the ones on the Sabenzas and so forth. You've got sort of two bits of grip, one at the bottom here, and then you've got the second one further up. Not wildly deep carry, none of them are actually. The only thing about this one is this point here does stick up quite a bit and can be seen as a bit of a hot point by some people. I must admit I don't feel it as particularly bad, but it's fine, works okay, looks very industrial. It's not a beautiful milled titanium, but it does work really well. And the Rockstead, now Nick Shabazz says it was this clip, which has made in Japan stamped onto it in a less than attractive style. I mean, Nick Shabazz said it was like they were making the knives and they'd run out of clips, so they ran next door to the factory that makes gas station knives, bought a pile of them and just stuck it on there. And in some ways he's right. It's steel, it's not titanium, but actually a clip is a spring, and in terms of its function as a spring, clipping these onto your trousers, this is by far the best clip to use here. It's the ugliest, the cheapest looking, on the most expensive knife, but actually it's probably the one that works the best. Next thing I want to talk about is the pivots. Pivots and hardware. The hardware on this they're both blacked torque screws. I can't remember the T8 or T10, but they're both the same size. And on the other side, they are flat. It's another area that Nick Shabazz criticised. He said that you could see where they'd been potted off, but I don't think you can on mine. Mine look just fine. The pivot itself, though, is rather like a Spencer. You've got very large washers and a pivot bushing. Now, unlike the Sebenza, these are both washers are the same size, and they have no oil or grease pockets, but as I say, it rides on a bushing, so that means that this knife is relatively easy to take apart and put back together. Comes with a tool to do so, just like a Sebenza does, but you just crank these bolts down until they're tight. The action has been determined effectively in the factory, and it is the smoothest, glassiest action, and most commentators seem to suggest they compare it to a Chris Reeve Sebenza in terms of its action, but most will tell you that this is even smoother. Not saying that a Sebenza isn't smooth, but that this is even smoother. Now, the Inkosi made a big change for Chris Reeves in that instead of having a bushing bearing where you simply crank down 1, 2, 3 bolts, all of which were identical, we now have a bolt here very much like that on the Sebenza at that end of the knife. It does have the lanyard round that rather than a separate pin, but in terms of fixing the scales together, you use a very similar bolt. Instead of having a bolt here which is the same, again, Chicago screw with a it's not really, I don't know if you call it a bushing, but like a bushing around it as this one does on the Sebenza. And the Sebenza also has a bushing and the 2 different size washers. Here we have 2 enormous washers. They're actually slightly larger than the tang of the knife, so you can actually see them when the knife is folded. You can actually see the washers in there, and they really are big. Again, they've got grease pockets like the Sebenza washers. They're both the same size in this one though, and they come slightly bigger than the pin here, so there's a cutout in the washers that fits around that pin, so that holds the washers straight so that the blade moves on the washers rather than the washers moving against the scales, which is the way it's designed to be, and it gives an action. Now, because of that, this knife actually has an adjustable pivot, so you can set it if you want to be, glass smooth, Chris Reeve Sebenza style action, or you can have it a flicky action, or you can have it a tighter action. It's entirely up to you. You choose, and it comes with 222 lock tight, so that's the pink stuff rather than the blue stuff, and that is a lighter hold, which means you can use lots of it, and you don't have to worry about it to have a sticking or locking. Now, the Medford has a pretty much what's now become a standard straightforward phosphor bronze washers lock bar pivot. The interesting thing on this one is that Greg Medford doesn't want you to ever take his knives apart, so he uses a proprietary 4-pin bolt head on both sides, and also tells you that your warranty would be void if you were to open it. So he's saying don't. He also likes you to run it dry, but it's still very smooth, works very well. The only thing, as I say, is the lock rather lets that down. Last part of the knife that I've really overlooked is the blade. Now, in terms of the looks, I really like the way the Medford looks, with this deep grind, what looks like really thick stock, but actually it's no thicker than the other two. In fact, I haven't measured them, but I think they're about the same all the way through. They're almost identical, but because you've got this big flat and then this deep grind, one might expect it doesn't make a very good cutter, but I know from watching some of the stuff that Paddy's done with it as a really good cutter. I've obviously not wanted to. I haven't cut up a room full of carpet with it, for example, which Paddy did, because it's not my knife, so I'm not going to do that. The Inkosi just looks proper cutter. I mean, it's a hollow grind, which also means, of course, as you sharpen it, you get quite a lot of sharpening depth, maybe about 1/8 of an inch, before the blade starts to thicken, or behind the edge thickness starts to grow. It looks like it means business. It's a worky knife with a stonewashy finish, which will cover a lot of scratches and so forth. The Rockstead, though, I mean, this is where the real show is in the Rockstead. First of all, it's a different material. The other turbo is S35VN. This is YXR7. Sorry, I couldn't remember for a second. And then it's DLC coated. Very, very, very highly polished. There's a bit of grease on there because I keep touching the blade. But you can see how reflective that is. Now, it is black, and I know in the video it tends to be difficult to see that. It looks as though it's just shiny polished, but it's shiny polished black. A little fuller in it with that little hole in it. Now, that fuller and hole, it doesn't serve any purpose. It's not like the machining hole in Sabenzas or anything like that. It's purely Rockstead's logo. But being a Japanese knife, there are a couple of things that's reminiscent of. The bohei on a Japanese sword, like the groove, often called a blood groove, serves two purposes on a sword. One is to lighten the weight of the blade without reducing its strength, and the other is that when it moves through the air quickly for Aido and things like that, it makes a good noise. On here, it's purely for the aesthetics. But this one is not a hollow grind like the other two. This is, in fact, the complete inverse. This is a convex zero grind, so there's no final bevel. The edge just goes from the Shinogi ridgeline there right the way to the edge in a constant flow. It also has a different blade angle or edge angle at this end, where my thumb is, to the tip. It's 30 degrees at this side inclusive, so 15 degrees either side, going to 24 degrees at the tip, or 12 either side. The one downside to the Rockstead, and it's a huge issue, is it's 65 Rockwell, which is soft by Rockstead standards. They do two different steels, 165 and 167. This one's 65. Now 65 is 6 higher than the Chris Reeve or the Medford, so it doesn't blunt very easily. You can cut glass, you can scratch glass with this blade quite easily. I'm not going to, because it'll damage the blade as well as cutting the glass. It shouldn't need sharpened for years. It does need a strop just to restore the edge, but if you see some of the videos that they do on their edge retention, you see them cutting through 1,000 pieces of not 10mm sisal rope, but 25mm sisal rope 1,000 times, and it still cuts paper without any problem. There was a chap on YouTube, and if I could remember his name I would tell you, who did a 1,000 cardboard cut test with his Rockstead and showed no wear at all. But if you do want to sharpen it, it's very difficult. It requires specialist equipment, and if you want to keep that edge shape and that polish, the only way to do it is to send it back to Rockstead. Now granted, Rockstead will sharpen it for life. You just send it back, they regrind it, resharpen it, send it back to you, repolish it, send it back to you for free. But you do have to send it to them in Japan, which costs you $30 for the return, plus the postage you've paid to send it to Japan. So you're talking about $60 or 50 quid or something like that in order just to get your knife sharpened. But it should be something you don't do very often. As long as you keep it stropped, you're probably talking 3 to 5 years before you need to get it sharpened. So I'd certainly be willing to live with that. I think it would be a price worth paying, because you you always have the sharpest knife in the room, and it doesn't require any ongoing work. That's, if you think, if even with my S90V, my son's Wasp, it takes me 15 or 20 minutes to sharpen it. The first sharpen I did on it took me an awful lot longer than that. What's your time worth if you've got to do that, every couple of weeks? 50 or 60 quid for 2 or 3 years at least, maybe 5 years sharpening. I think that works. That's fine for me. So I think this is the prettiest blade, and it's in some ways the most practical. But if you do dull it or chip it or roll it, well, you won't roll it because it's so hard. It won't roll. It'll either chip or it won't. And the way they avoid, to chip a blade, you have first of all to have a small chip to make a big chip. It's very difficult to chip something if there isn't a small. So the reason that they go to this insane level of polishing is it's very difficult to chip a blade that doesn't have any little minor chips in it. If you look at a blade under a microscope, even a really good blade like this, even a polished edge, you'll see lots of little lines or grind marks in it. There just aren't in that. You can blow it up as big as you like on a microscope, and it is really genuinely polished right to the edge. You can't look at this one because this is Paddy's edge. This isn't Greg Medford's edge, but it comes with a slightly toothy edge. Even the Chris Reeves knives come with a slightly toothy edge. Now, it's not a bad edge; it's a good edge, and it works and it wears really well. But if you did that with a 65 Rockwell blade, it would chip badly very easily. I believe these don't chip very easily at all, but they won't roll. They'll either chip or nothing. And as I say, it just needs a bit of stropping just to keep it sharp. And they like you to use a denim strop, lubricated or coated with metal polish. In Britain, you use Brasso. There's a Japanese version of it, and I'm sure there's something in America, whether it's Brasso or whether it's something else. In terms of cutting, this is a phenomenal cutter. I'll do a separate video for its cutting. I'll do a couple of little demonstrations, but what I don't want to do is 1,000 rope cut and then find I've got to send it off to Japan to get it sharpened. But there's some little tricks you can do with it which are quite amazing. These are both great cutters. I say you can't. I checked the edge on them, but it's pointless to measure this edge because this is the edge that Paddy put on it. It's a brilliant edge. Is it better or worse than Greg Medford's? I don't know, because I didn't see the original. This, I believe, is the factory edge. It's a lovely factory edge. All I've done with it is just cut a little bit of paper just so I can get a feel for how smooth it is. Very, very smooth. No nicks or hang-ups in it. It just cuts paper easily. Now, in terms of warranty and backup, all three of them have lifetime warranties, and all three of them you can send them back and they will fix them. But I would say the best warranty is probably the Chris Reeves knife, in that you can send it back. They do spa treatments and replacement things and so forth that they charge you for, but basically if you break the knife or damage it, they'll fix it. They encourage you to take it apart and clean it, and they send you the necessary tools and lubrication and Loctite to do that. And if you take it apart and you can't get it back together again, they say just stick it in a bag, send it to us, and we'll put it back together for you, no charge. So you really can't beat that. The Rockstead warranty is pretty good as well, but it's got some limitations. It's pretty good if you are the original owner, because they will sharpen it forever, they will warrant it forever. What they would do if you... in terms of taking it apart, it varies on the knife that you have. They have a reputation for being like Medford, don't take it apart or it'll be out of warranty. In their warranty information, it says, don't take your knife apart, it will nil the warranty except for the Higo and Hizen. The Hizen is just a smaller version of the Higo knives, which you are encouraged to take apart and clean, and gives you instructions for how to do it, and tells you to do it to keep it clean. So, and also they come with the tool to do it. But if you're not the original owner and you have to register it as the original owner, you don't get any warranty cover at all, and that's pretty horrible. I believe Chris Reeves warrants the knives no matter how many owners you've got. Medford's warranty is okay as long as you never take the thing apart, but God help you if you take it apart. They do genuinely say that's your warranty void, which is, it's not good. I think a knife like this, one of these sort of free flow knives, you ought to be able to take them apart because they're going to get gubbins in there from time to time, and you want to give it a good clean out and look after it. So I think that's a bit of a bad thing, Mr. Medford. But at least I think his warranty is transferable, so all is not bad. It's not as bad as the Rockstead. The Rockstead warranty is fine. You have to pay post to and from Japan. I suppose that sounds horrible to Americans because internal mail from America to America. It's fine. If you're in the UK, it's pretty much the same if you have to send it to the US or send it to Japan. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But their warranty after that is pretty good, so long as you're the original owner. But the minute you sell it on, there you're sunk. One last thing, and I haven't got the boxes to get them out and show you them. The Chris Reeve knife comes in a lovely cardboard box wrapped up in a Chris Reeves cloth with the bits and pieces for taking it to bits. The Medford comes in a really nice little kind of what the case they call, a little plastic waterproof case. Very, very smart. But Rockstead trumps a lot. Comes in a Kirin box, a little wooden Japanese presentation box, and they're the most beautifully. There are Kirin boxes and there are Kirin boxes. This is absolutely top notch. They're just beautifully smooth and perfectly fitting, with a little slot in the top inside for the paperwork that comes with it. It's just beautiful. You can't get a presentation better than that. I bought some Japanese chisels recently for a friend as a present, and they came in a Kirin box. But you look at one and you compare it. You look at that one and you compare it to this one, and you think, no, the Rockstead one is just absolutely perfect. Beautiful thing. So, final category that I wanted to have a look at was price and value for money. Now, this is where it's really, really difficult. One of these knives is actually suddenly comes out as being superb value for money. Absolutely excellent. A bargain if ever there was such a thing in the knife world, and that is the Inkosi. The reason being is, and you'll very rarely see this in a group of knives, it's the cheapest. It's not, in the UK, it's not that much cheaper than the Medford, but it is cheaper than the Medford by about 50 quid. So, well, it depends. I've seen it between £450 and £495. I don't know what it is in America. It'd be less than that in dollars, I suspect. The Medford comes in around the £500 mark, and one could argue that that's a little bit expensive for what it is, but it is a Medford. I'm not sure you could quite call it a custom knife. You probably have to call it a mid-tech. None of these are custom knives, they're all production knives. The Rockstead is, of course, ridiculously expensive, although probably better value, if you're going to buy one, probably better value to buy one of these in the UK, better to buy these in the US, because this comes in at almost £1,000. These ones come in at sort of half that, so you could have these two or that one for your same money. In America, I think you could probably have 3 of these two for one of these, because I think this one comes in about $12.50 in Blade HQ at the moment in dollars, and as I say, I think this is more like $400 and the Medford is probably something more like that as well. So you could probably have the two of them and a third one, have a Sebenza thrown in, where for the price of this one. Is this knife worth the money? Is it real value for money? No. Well, I mean, my Kaiser zip slip, which I carry a lot, is titanium. It's 35 VN, £100. And it's a perfectly good knife. Nothing wrong with it. Is it as good as any of these three? Definitely not. But it would do most of what you need most of the time. So it's very difficult to call any of these value for money. And it's very difficult to say one is ridiculously overpriced. I know why this one costs more than this one and this one. I can see why these two cost about the same. I think, you could value these at the same amount, these two as the same amount of money, very, very easily. Different, because there's different types of work has gone into the pair of them. And different aesthetics have been used, different philosophies behind them, but you can see why they might be about the same value. This one, with all this polishing and all the work that goes into that blade, you can see why it costs more money. Is it worth twice as much as these two? I don't know. You can only judge that for yourself, I'm afraid. Now, finally, is there a winner? Is there a best knife here? In some ways, you might think I'm biased, but actually I think there is. In fact, I think there's a fairly clear hierarchy here. I think the Rockstead is the best knife here. Whether in the carrying it in the long term, you would still feel that way if you find it starting to blunt and the prospect of having to send it off to Japan starts to loom its head, and you can't just stick it on a stone and give it a tickle. Maybe that might wear off, but it's got the smartest blade, the sharpest blade, the most beautiful handle. You might think it's difficult here, but it has the best fit and finish and the best construction. No doubt about that. But is it worth twice as much as the Insingo, which is, to my mind, if you like, the second place here? I mean, this is just a really, really, really nice knife, and I'm very keen to get hold of one of these. But I'd also like one of these. Now, this might be, in some ways, third in this test, but it's still a brilliant looking knife. It's still great in hand. I would imagine this would be a really good worker. Might be a very good everyday carry knife as well. The thing that really would put me off it is that lock release, which is a real bit of a pain. But these are just three excellent knives, so there isn't a winner and a loser, really. All three of them could be the winner. All three of them could come in last. I mean, the price alone on the Rockstead could knock it out of the competition. But most people would look at that and say, £1,000, you've got to be joking. And I know exactly how you feel. This has come to me as a loaner for the pass round group. Would I pay that? If I had it, maybe, I don't know. But I'm definitely on the lookout for Chris Reeve knives. I think I probably prefer the Sebenza, but there's just something about the classic nature of it. Plus, the Sebenza only has one cutout here rather than the two, and I don't find these are perfect for my hand. But if you've only got one cutout, it comes easier. Plus, I use my left hand, and the other big thing about the Chris Reeves knives is you can get a left-handed knife without any problem for no extra money. And so a left-hand Sebenza might be the thing, and I might quite like a small one because sub 3-inch blade might be closer to carryable in the UK. Certainly wouldn't get you into as much trouble. Problem with these big knives is you could easily find yourself arrested. Certainly over 3.5 inches, you're already starting to look in danger there. So there we are. These knives will be passing on to Al, and he'll have a look at them, and then Paddy's already had this, but he's just got, seen these pass around, he picked himself up an Insingo, a small Insingo, which I'm hoping I'll be able to see at some stage, because actually I think that looks like a nice knife. My question with it getting a Chris Reeves is whether it's a small or a large. Anyway, I've whittled on for a long time. It's the longest video I've ever done. I hope that some of you are still with me at this point. You haven't all fallen asleep. So please take the time to click a thumbs up for a like, and please feel free to subscribe. There will be a couple of other videos coming along in the not too distant future. There'll be some cutting with this, and I'm also going to be showing these. I've got a couple of Shane knives to show you, which are great. And I was going to put one of them in this shootout, because this one here, it's a big chunk of a knife. For a UK legal folder, it's a big chunky knife, and it would be a credible competitor to this group. It's a British made slip joint. It's a 3-inch blade as opposed to 3.5 inch, which would effectively what these three are, because that's the legal maximum. But this would be just as capable of most things. It's not a one-hand open frame lock. Anyway, we will be seeing those coming up very shortly. So thank you very much for bearing with me. See you all again soon. Bye.